Welcome everyone to This Explainer. I am so excited you're here today because we're jumping right into an absolutely fascinating piece of text. We're going to deconstruct a really pivotal segment of the archival file Omens Foretold, specifically Chapter 12, Part 5, Juliett. Now, if you're someone who loves a good mix of intense tactical logistics, psychological tension, and, high-stakes thriller elements, well, you are definitely in the right place. So let's just dive right in and unpack exactly what makes this whole operation so incredibly gripping.
Expect almost near immediate arrest or detainment. Now think about that for a second. That is not a warning of failure. That's literally the plan. I mean, you gotta ask yourself, what kind of extreme military operation actually plans for the deliberate capture of its own top-tier commanders? It completely flips the traditional script of a military rescue or assault right on its head. To figure out how on earth they pull this off, we really have to look at the meticulous behind-the-scenes prep work.
So, that brings us to Section 1, Logistics and Communications.
Before anybody gets captured, though, the groundwork has to be laid. And the constraints set by our lead strategist, Benedictus, man, they are incredibly intense. First off, let's just anchor ourselves in the timeline we get from the source document. The primary event narrative date is April 11th, 1994. But get this, the file itself wasn't even discovered until March 2nd, 2026. That right away gives this whole text a really cool hidden history archival mystery vibe. We're looking at an event buried for decades. And on that specific day in 94, the clock was ticking down fast.
You see, Benedictus lays down some incredibly strict hardware requirements for their communication setups. These units have got to be compact, easily securable, and they have to fit into a humvee that's already crammed with a minimum of 4 guys. Plus, they need to be totally shock and vibration resistant. Actually, they're moving so frantically that they're prioritizing using older, emptied-out cases for the switch boxes just to modify the computers and radios. And they need a minimum of 4 of these setups immediately for their own team, plus extra units for the teams designated as SolarOracle, LightBeam, and RadiantOrb. They literally have 0 time for rigorous field testing. It is wild.
And why the mad rush? Well, 70. That is exactly the number of minutes they have. Monroe, another key player here, confirms that the RadiantOrb team just hit a bypass and is exactly 70 minutes away from their location. 70 minutes to build custom, untraceable comms equipment entirely from scratch. The urgency is just absolutely palpable. Every single second counts here, which makes their next steps look even crazier.
Moving on to Section 2, the art of deception.
Okay, so having the right radio gear is really only half the battle. Now they actually have to look the part. Because if you're planning to get captured on purpose, technical constraints have to give way to a raw, visceral, physical disguise. And this just brilliantly shows the insane level of detail Benedictus demands. They aren't just slapping on fake mustaches here. Damont is out there seeding databases to make their new, temporary IDs incredibly hard to verify quickly. They're stamping appropriately formatted dog tags and lacing them right into their boots. They're giving each other strict military regulation haircuts. Some guys are left clean-shaven, while others get a 3 to 7 day shadow. They are deliberately dirtying and tearing up their combat uniforms, the whole goal, to look exactly like battered troops coming straight from the field. It's gritty, it's super specific, and it is absolutely necessary to sell the lie.
But looking the part is just Layer 1. Layer 2 is how they actually behave once they're captured. Just look at the stark contrast in their engagement rules. The troops are told to memorize their temporary IDs, carry only sidearms, no rifles at all, and if they get questioned, they must strictly defer to their commanders. Now, the commanders, on the other hand, hold all the heavy responsibility. They're the ones who have to engage directly with the captors. They carry secure documentation packets, but crucially, these packets are completely stripped of any location-identifying data or sensitive schematics. The commanders are carrying the burden of this entire operation's success squarely on their shoulders.
All right, so the teams are disguised, the rules are set in stone, and the commo units are loaded up. So where exactly are they going? Well, the deployment is split into 3 primary humvee missions. Commander Michaelson is heading out towards SolarOracle, Commander Jameson is making his way toward a checkpoint to link up with RadiantOrb, and Commander Collins and his team, they're heading straight to LightBeam. These teams are deploying right into the teeth of the enemy, equipped with those altered commo units right before a massive tactical broadcast blackout is lifted. Which leads us to Section 3, the psychology of command.
Now, you can probably imagine the sheer tension inside that command tent as these guys get ready to literally drive into their own arrests. But human nature is a funny thing, right? Right before they launch, the source text gives us this incredible reflective pause. Amidst all this intense, high-stakes pressure, an elderly soldier, the camp barber, just strolls in, pulls out a roll of duct tape, and jokingly tapes these combat-ready commanders right to their chairs.
Over the loud buzzing of his hair trimmers, he just laughs and says, "You ain't going nowhere yet. I've been waiting for this for a while, boys." It is just such a brilliant, tension-breaking moment of levity. I mean, picture it. These hardened men, completely hyped up and ready to sacrifice everything, just sitting there, duct taped to folding chairs, getting a trim. It really grounds this whole military thriller in some raw humanity.
And sitting stuck in that chair actually allows Benedictus's mind to drift a bit, giving us a deep, really impartial look into his psychological state. He starts reflecting on years of feeling like he's been painted as a traitor. He's deeply frustrated by how greed, politics, and corporate interests have, at least in his view, destroyed things from within. He feels this bitter irony that the public is suddenly turning around and demanding they do something about all the chaos. But the really compelling part here is that Benedictus doesn't just sit there pointing fingers. He actually acknowledges his own blame. He admits to all the times he knew things were wrong but just failed to speak up against evil, recognizing how human nature constantly tries to shift the blame to seek absolution. And out of all that heavy, internal reflection comes the core philosophical message of this entire narrative. Benedictus kind of shakes himself out of his dark thoughts and realizes this. It's not past or dreams of future actions, but what people do now that might make the difference. It really doesn't matter what mistakes were made yesterday or what grand things they hope to do tomorrow. The only thing that actually moves the needle is present, immediate action.
He wonders how anyone can even know if it's too late unless they actually try, instead of just sitting around discussing it for an eternity. And honestly, this bridges this fictional tactical scenario right over to a pretty universal human truth. Think about your own life for a second. When the time finally comes to act on something important, are you going to step up or are you just going to discuss it forever? It is an incredibly powerful question to ask yourself right before driving out into the unknown.
All right, let's get into Section 4, the final signal.
Okay, so the quiet reflection is over, and the barber snips the duct tape with a pair of scissors with this dramatic flair. Suddenly, the pacing snaps right back to fast, tactical execution. But right before they drive off, there's this one final really touching detail the author slips in. Turns out, Benedictus secretly ordered Damont to record that entire haircut and duct tape sequence. Even Monroe had no idea about it. And why? So that if they actually manage to survive this seemingly impossible suicide mission, they can play the tape back later and have a good laugh. It's just a beautiful little touch of hope tucked into a very dark plan.
Now, let's jump back to the tech. We mentioned those commo units earlier. Specifically, the team's tech expert, Tweaker, has successfully built what they call modified SINGARs. For those who might not be familiar, a SINGARs is a standard military radio system. But this specific one is deeply altered. It's designed to go completely dark and then elegantly link back up using a very specific, undetected frequency band to entirely bypass the enemy's radar once the commanders are taken inside the hostile arena.
So here is exactly how the electronic warfare execution is going to play out. The moment they are captured, the teams go entirely dark to avoid any suspicion. They just wait until they are brought deep inside the enemy location. Then, once they secretly power up their modified setups, their tech guy Damont will drop the overarching broadcast blackout, and simultaneously, Damont is going to switch over to heavily jamming the northeast, east, and south sectors on higher frequencies, effectively creating this massive electronic smokescreen for their communications.
But here's the catch. How will headquarters actually know it's really them? How do they safely connect through all that heavy jamming? Well, it all comes down to a brilliantly simple verification trick. The initial commo challenge from headquarters is just going to be the name of a band, the Cars. And the passphrase response from the captured commanders, it'll be a clever transposition of one of their songs, Singe You're Gone. The moment Damont hears Singe You're Gone, he confirms the link and officially flips the switch on the jamming.
And you know what? That is exactly where our file excerpt leaves us. The teams are perfectly disguised, the humvees are rolling out, the electronic jamming strategy is totally locked in, and the passphrase is set. They are literally driving directly into the hands of their captors. So what actually happens when they finally enter that arena and the radio clicks on? Well, you'll just have to keep exploring the Omens Foretold archives to find out. I really hope this explainer gave you a clear, structured understanding of the intense logistics and the incredible psychology buried right within this text. Keep learning, keep analyzing, and I will catch you on the next explainer.